Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Our show today is A Woman's Prerogative Part 2 in partnership with E360 TV. A warm welcome to our loyal viewers and our friends at E360 TV. And hello to all of our friends on our usual platforms, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and X. Today's topic is the great debate, remote work versus office life in today's world, Part 2. I'm Caroline HEWARD, known as the Harley Street Stress Expert. I'm your host today for the show, and I'm absolutely thrilled and honoured to be representing Dr. Jacqueline as your host for USA Global TV and Radio's flagship show. I'm a TV presenter, resident therapist for USA Global TV and Radio. Tonight, I'm joined by another full-time panelist who's coming all the way from Australia, and that's Mariska Dupree, our person that is the coach extraordinaire on the channel. Please bring out Mariska Dupree. Hello.
Hello, Caroline.
I had to think twice before I said New Zealand. So now you've moved.
I noticed.
Had to pause and stop. Please do share with our viewers, Mariska, a little bit about what you do and how you help people, especially for the people that are here for the first time and are hearing about your work.
Thank you, Caroline. So I work with leaders, whether you are an up-and-coming leader stepping into leadership, or you are already a leader and you want to step up within your leadership space. I love working with specialists moving into leadership, or even specialists within that leadership space, helping you to also bring a little bit humanness into your space, because as specialists, typically, we know how to work with the things or the specialization in which we started, but not necessarily so much with the humans. That helps us to be even better within our team spaces. So you can get hold of me, as you saw, via my website or my email, which is mariska@journey2discover.com, or alternatively on LinkedIn, and just send me a message and we can start our conversation. And with that, Caroline, how about you?
Thank you, Mariska. I love this too. Journey 2 with the number 2. I'm known as the Harley Street Stress Expert, and I help you bust your stress. I work with root cause therapy and chakra psychology in identifying the root cause of what creates your stress symptoms in the first place. So it could be something that's happened in your childhood or early adulthood, and I identify the root cause of your repeating patterns that create your stress. I also provide lunch and learn workshops and seminars for corporates, either online or in person. And you can reach me, you can follow me on LinkedIn and Facebook, and you can reach me by email. So let's get into the topic, Mariska. We had a wonderful part 1 of A Woman's Prerogative on this topic, and it's the great debate. And it really is a debate. remote work versus office life in today's world. When you hear that, what does it bring up for you? Because when I was looking for a topic title, it really felt like it's quite a debate right now as to people not wanting to go to work and yet being asked that they need to be in the office and the workspace because it's time to go back. So what are your thoughts and what comes up for you in terms of this great debate and working remotely?
Caroline, I think for me, there's a couple of things to take into consideration. So I've had similar conversations with quite a few of my clients too, as they're thinking through how they want to proceed within their careers, what it is that they're looking for, how they want to set themselves up. And for some of us, we need that human interaction more regularly than for others. And in those cases, having a workplace where we can actually go into the office and interact with other people, very useful. It's also very helpful to have that space for teams to build. It's a lot more tricky to build teams remotely or even hybrid teams than it is for people that see each other each day. So taking those sort of things into consideration, I think that's for me one of the things that when I think about, is it remote work or is it back to office, what is really the benefits for each one and what it is that we want to accomplish in that space. What's the purpose for the team getting together? It's almost like asking me about meetings. Now, meetings can be wonderful things, and meetings can also be the most boring thing on the planet. I'm sure that a lot of people have had experiences where they went into meetings and almost fell asleep. I've had a few colleagues where I actually noted them falling asleep. And they might have had meetings where they felt very invigorated afterwards. So it's really around what it is that we want out of that process. I think that's coming up for me when I think about this topic specifically, and being very intentional with it. So not just going back for the sake of going back, and also not just doing remote for the sake of being remote. So really being intentional would be the place where I would start. And well, with that, how about you?
I'm in total agreement with everything that you've said, Mariska. And at the same time, I have had some of those online meetings, team meetings. And although they've been very structured and productive, I've found it a little bit odd because, like you said, there's a place for meeting in an office, and there's an experience that you just don't get when you're online, and it almost feels a little bit forced when you're online. And at the same time, we've got the work done and we've got the brief sorted out. It just feels not as comfortable for me because I'm quite an extrovert, so I prefer that social interaction. But there are many people, such as insurance and banking and the health sector, that are very much doing a lot of online consultations, online calls and online activity in terms of work. And I frequently have picked up a call where the dog's barking, or there's a child playing, or I can hear a TV on in the background, which doesn't feel very professional to me. And at the same time, you know, they are saying that some of our workers are working from home. My feeling is that some professions, such as banking and insurance and the NHS, in terms of the medical professional world, I feel that it's important to be confidential and be security aware with people's details and in the phone calls and consultations that they're doing online. What are your thoughts about security in terms of those kinds of professions, Mariska? Because that certainly comes up for me as a topic for broad debate when people are working from home.
Caroline, I think that is one of those extra added layers that we do need to think about when we say, okay, I'm going to work from home. And what does this actually entail when I think about my type of work that I do? And as you mentioned, bankers, I don't know. Do I want to go and see my bank manager at his house or online? Potentially not. I like going into the bank. Not always, but to go and see them and have a decent conversation and feel cared for within that space, there's a different experience to it. And I think for me also, knowing that they have the information that they have these days, especially in the local space, right, the likelihood of them being able to take care of it there versus, well, on a personal PC at somebody's house, different story. So I want to make also sure that my information is cared for in the appropriate way, so that we do not get all these other wonderful people that can siphon off interesting things and make us say and do things that we don't normally say and do. So yes, I absolutely agree that security is a big consideration. One of the other things, as you were talking about the doctors, that came up for me was, well, I'm not too sure how do they do blood pressure checks and all of that online, because I don't have the equipment at home. So I'm not sure how they would even try to do that. So there's certain things that, well, we just need to be in person. That's the way it sort of works. We are in true form on a physical plane, and we need to have some physical interactions. There's a reason for it. And then there's some other things that we can potentially do online with a lot of forethought. So as you mentioned, that meeting that was productive, potentially not necessarily as socially interactive, might have been organized in a different way.
I must admit, just thinking about team meetings, I'm the type of person that bounces off people. And I do like when you're in a room and that has an energy and a vibrancy about it that I don't feel that I can quite get online in the same way. Maybe I'm just a bit of an extrovert, but I feel that there is that bouncing off when somebody says something in a room, a boardroom or a meeting room physically, that you can kind of feel comfortable to interject because you can see everybody and you can see more of their physiology and their body language. And when you're in a screen, it depends on the camera. Some people don't even have the cameras on, but it's, you know, because I've been to those meetings where there's the host of the meeting saying, can you please turn your camera on? I mean, they could be having breakfast, you know? But this is the thing about, you know, sort of times have changed, and it's about how we structure, how we work online and remotely, and this feeling of being able to say, oh yeah, that's a great idea, and you know, what about this, I feel is not so easy to do online from my perspective personally as an extrovert. And I feel I'm calmed down quite a bit in terms of meetings. Otherwise I might keep the floor going where I know that I shouldn't do. What are your thoughts in terms of what I've just shared, Mariska, in terms of that energy and vibrancy of that physical meeting versus the online only seeing head and maybe shoulders or nothing if the camera is off?
Well, I will first address the piece around cameras being off. Please switch them on. If your PC, for some odd reason, does not have a camera, plug your phone in and get a camera sorted. Because it's so much better to actually look at a person and see their reactions to whatever it is that we're sharing and smiles. Yes, we can get that with the audio as well. But as you might have noticed, while Caroline was talking, I did a bit of nodding. So if she can see that, it's a lot easier because I don't need to make a sound. So taking things like that into consideration, I think, is really, really important. And that's something, especially with the people when we are doing coaching and looking at the remote work that they might be doing, or some of their teams being not in the same vicinity, we actually look at things like this, making sure that people switch their cameras on. Yes, we know you are in a work environment. It is not going to necessarily look as glamorous as this. And we would still love to see you. It does not, however, have the same full body experience, as you mentioned, Caroline. And for some people, that might be helpful. I know quite a few introverts that go, well, I prefer the flatness of people versus their 3D-ness might be overwhelming for some. And in saying that, we do get a lot more information when we are in a room with people. We can also have different types of conversations. It's very interesting. I had a conversation. I'm busy with some team coach training at the moment. And one of the elements within the team coaching space is being able to have a conversation with your co-coach while the rest of the team observes the conversation, but you are not part of the conversation. So doing that online versus doing that in a room where we have other people around us, quite a different space. And I am yet to figure out how to do that online so that it feels, I won't even go and say natural, but not awkward. So being able to work through that and test things out, see what works. But in general, we have more flexibility when it comes to in-person things, I think, than it is when we are online, because we have a little bit of a two-dimensional limitation, so to speak. And Caroline, I'm wondering, when you think about the benefits of office versus remote, what else is coming up for you?
This two-dimensional scenario that you've described is very much how I feel about it, that I do like the 3D version of people, the smiles. And I do feel that when you're staring into the screen intently, looking at everybody and listening as well, it actually is much harder in a team environment, I feel. And it also is more taxing in terms of the focus. Whereas if it was physical, I feel that, it's just much easier. And it's much easier to have those non-verbal cues and to be able to respond to those non-verbal bits of communication. It's like sort of standing at the coffee machine before we sit down. That bit's missing. And in A Woman's Prerogative Part 1, Reverend Lydia mentioned about donuts at the coffee machine, and I just thought, whoa, I want to go to those meetings with the donuts, because there's definitely no donuts in my meetings. And at the same time, I'm looking at how it affects employee well-being and what the mental health implications are of working remotely versus being in the office working. And my feeling is that it's more tasking to be in a screen and more draining visually to be in a screen all day, as well as in the face-to-face interactions on the screen. And for myself personally, it makes me feel very headachy when I'm in a screen, and it makes my eyes very tired and sore quite quickly. And so from a mental health well-being perspective, I don't think it's as good to be in the screen all of the time. And I find that if I take a break and come away from the screen, like do something else, like make a drink or make a sandwich, or literally just do something different, I feel energized and I feel better from being away from the screen. What are your thoughts on mental health and employee well-being in terms of working remotely and in that screen intensely?
Caroline, I think what you mentioned about being able to take ourselves away from it, if I think about the way that I operate at the moment versus when I actually went into the office. I mean, if I had meetings, I would need to walk from one space to another space. I would get great exercise in. I would see people. I would get out. There's movement that happened. Whereas now, jumping from one meeting to the other meeting, I literally just sit in one spot. So if I don't make a concerted effort of taking myself out of this room and doing something else and coming back to it, then it doesn't happen. So that, I think, is really, really important. And I know for myself, going out into nature, just getting a little bit of fresh air, seeing bugs fly around, seeing birds, hopefully there's some plant life around. It's invigorating. It helps me just feel alive and feel like a human being. Whereas if I had to sit in front of my PC 24/7, I might go nuts. Although I do know that there's loads of people that enjoy that more than anything else, and they live themselves into the 2D world so much so that they sometimes don't get up for hours and hours or days and days. And that might not be the best thing for our mental health or our bodies, because, as mentioned previously, we are in a 3-dimensional environment, and part of that entails that we move around. We didn't evolve to be in front of screens all the time. So it makes quite a bit of a difference. And it's also, if you do work remotely, a great way to think about how you actually use your space. Do you have an office or a office/gym or a space at least around you where you can interact with something that might help with some of that mental health areas that we need? And Caroline, I know that you have moved from the city now to a place that has a garden. So what's some of the tips and tricks that you are doing these days to keep that mental health at its peak performance?
Thank you, Mariska. And I was nodding each time that you shared each point because I'm in total agreement with what you've shared, and I will attest to the fact that it's important to take that break. And for myself, I take time away from the screen and go and do something else, sometimes halfway through the day. And I know this might sound a bit indulgent. I will have a shower to warm up because it can get very cold when I'm sitting still. And so I'll probably have about 2 or 3 showers a day. Probably not great for the boiler working overtime. Or I might change into something else to change the feel of how I'm feeling, or change the task so I'm not doing one task all of the time. And changing task changes your energy and changes your frequency in terms of the way that you feel. Or I might take a phone call and indulge in some phone inquiries, and I might decide to do a couple of phone inquiries that I need to do, and that changes my feeling and my vibration in terms of going back to the screen. Mind you, I have to say that we do very much live in our phones, and when I was in an office environment, and when people are in an office environment, they're very much glued to their phones. So they're in a small screen in conversation and doing their social media, versus being in a larger screen and doing meetings. One of the things that I want to bring up is the perspective from the company, the fact that people working from home and not needing to go into the office. And when I was in London, particularly, I saw that there was nobody that was going in the banking industry and in insurance and in the tech industry in terms of the city. And I live not very far away from the city, and the city tube stations were empty and they never came back. the main city stations. So a lot of people that were working in the city professions, they stayed at home. Now, my feeling is that there will be huge financial savings from a company perspective of all their workers working from home, even though there is security challenges. I feel that from a company perspective, if all their workers that were working in the bank or insurance are working from home, then they don't need the fancy big offices in the middle of city or running up huge bills in terms of the electricity, the heating. And what will be happening, though, for the remote worker is the remote worker is running up those bills working from home. So what are your thoughts? Because, it is a win and a lose in different ways. And I don't know, because I'm unsure, if there is any budget from the companies for utilities when people are working from home remotely. What are your thoughts in terms of, this is like the big thing that nobody talks about, but actually the companies are winning by having their team remotely working?
Caroline, that's a very interesting point, because I think to a degree we have those big corner offices and all the rest of it. And if we're not using them, why do we have them? So I know with some organizations, the physical plant itself, so being within the engineering space, it is really tricky to not be in the office because you're not on a plant. So there's physical things that you need to do and interact with the plant. So I can't fix a gearbox if I'm not physically there to fix the gearbox. Not possible. For some odd reason, they do not want to do that remotely. Go figure. So I will physically need to be there. There's certain things that might be able to do remotely and certain things that we won't be able to do remotely. In the case of insurance agencies, for instance, or other agencies where you have more of a service-related type of thing that you are doing, more so than a product, I think it is something to definitely take into consideration around, well, do we really need the office? If we do, what do we need it for? And if we need it for this thing, is it required to be this specific space? And we might have some cost savings, as you mentioned, and see how we can redistribute that into other spaces. Because, as you also mentioned, if I'm going to be working remotely, it means that, well, I use the electricity in my house, which would, in all likelihood, go up a little or a lot, depending on what it is that you're running. Same with your internet provider, phone provider, blah, 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 all the rest of it. So depending on all of those sort of utility things, it might have quite a significant cost impact. And because we don't use it as much in the office, it might have a benefit in that space. In saying this, I do know that some employers have well, you need to come in a certain amount of days in the week, and it doesn't matter which days, which still has an overhead for them, because in general, they need to have the office open for 5 days a week still, even though they might only see some of the people in the office on a Monday, most of them there on a Tuesday, and some of them there on a Wednesday, and nobody there on a Friday. It makes a big difference within that space as well. So seeing how we can effectively do this, I think, also makes a big difference. And really thinking about what it is that we are trying to achieve in the process. I think a lot of times, I know for myself, and I have noticed with my clients as well, we don't always think about the intent. We do something, we try something, we want to solve a problem, but we don't give ourselves enough space to step back and go, okay, so what's the intent? What is it that we are trying to achieve in this process? And then start to problem solve from that space and really understanding the question first. before just jumping into whatever we think the question might be. So that's some of the thinking that I've done on this. And in all likelihood, there's still a load more that needs to be done.
Thank you, Mariska. Some interesting perspectives and some great shares there. And from the perspective of how it can be implemented further, I do feel that legislation needs to be brought in terms of how we go forward if remote working continues. And I feel personally that remote working is here to stay for many companies. And I feel that this term hybrid seems to be talked about a lot, that it's going to be a combination of being in the office and being at home and having that hybrid half and half, or a percentage of working from home as well as working in the office. But my thoughts are, do you feel, and we're coming to the end of our show, can you believe it? We've almost come to the end. So I do want to look at generational differences. Do you think that the generations have a role in terms of preferring to work remotely or versus office work? My personal view is that our younger generation, certainly our Generation Z and the Alpha generation that are coming up now, going into early working, and part-time working. My feeling is that they do like the remote activity of working because it gives them more flexibility, and also they like to stay in bed a little bit longer because they are on their social media. And that certainly is something that I have been privileged to hear from young people. So what are your quick thoughts on this before we close our show, Mariska?
Caroline, I think for me, the thing that comes up, I don't know if you've ever watched the movie WALL-E. It's about a small little robot that scavenge the earth to see whether it can find any life. And the reason why it needed to do that is, well, we messed up the planet apparently so bad that there wasn't any life left and everybody just went into a spaceship. So on the spaceship itself, we have all these people whizzing around in these cool little seats with screens wrapped around them. And that is, I think, to me, one of the things that we do need to be cognizant of. Yes, remote work does give us a lot more freedom, and it might also impact the type of social interactions we have. So taking into consideration that we came to this planet, and it is a three-dimensional planet with interactions that we have as a possibility, why would we want to give that up and only limit it to our very close family? Because if we only put ourselves behind a screen, it becomes really difficult to build deep connections. And I'm not saying that it's impossible, because I know for myself, I have built deep connections. I've never met Dr. Jacqueline in person. We have only met online. And Caroline, I know that you had the privilege of meeting her not so long ago when she came to the UK. And I'm sure that that was a wonderful experience to have and something to cherish. We need to be able to interact with people in a physical dimension because we are here in a physical dimension. So it almost feels like we are doing ourselves a disservice to an extent, and taking into consideration what impact that disservice might have. We are a social species. We do co-regulate a lot better with each other when we are in person. So taking that away, I don't know. We need to really think about how good that would be for us as a species in total, and not just our own preferences as human beings.
Thank you very much, Mariska. Some thought-provoking thoughts there and comments. Wow. I'm inclined to agree with you. And at the same time, I've built up incredible friendships online, including yourself, Dr. Jacqueline, people on this platform. And I've got into working online and on the screen. And at the same time, I did speak on stage last weekend. And I must admit, I felt good. It was really good to be speaking in front of a live audience. I felt something that was quite exhilarating. So even though I love working on this platform, I did feel a thrill and a sense of exhilaration from being in front of live people. And I remember saying, I love the fact that I'm here in front of a live audience, because it's what it made me feel. Well, we are completely out of time. Oh my gosh, that was so cool. I really enjoyed our wonderful debate. We have been exploring the great debate, remote work versus office life in today's world. Thank you so much, Mariska. Before we go, please, Mariska, share how people can contact you, what the best way of reaching you would be.
So if you would like to contact me, you can do that via my email, which is mariska@journey2discover.com. Or alternatively, you can also find me on LinkedIn and send me a message so we can start our conversation. I would love to hear from, well, any upcoming or already leaders that would like to bring some more humanness into their workspace. How about you, Caroline?
Thank you. And humanness all the way, Mariska. Well, for me, you can contact me on nomorestress@live.co.uk, or you can call me. If you're international, +44 is the code. If you're local, UK-based, 07523 120 189. Please do follow me on LinkedIn or Facebook. Those are my preferred platforms. And you can reach out and I will absolutely help you bust your stress. Well, we are right at the end, right at the top of our program tonight. Thank you so much, Mariska. We've had a wonderful share. I think we could go on and on. Part 1, part 2 we've done tonight, and part 3 and 4 I'm sure we could do again. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, whether you're here on the live or the replay. Just one final thing before we pass over to our sponsors. Join our VIP exclusive community and become an exclusive VIP community member. You'll have first access to our newest videos, photographs and insights on the British royal family, live streamed on USA Global TV and Radio and YouTube. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you next week for A Woman's Prerogative Part 1, which is 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, and part 2, A Woman's Prerogative, which is 4 p.m. Eastern Time and 9 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful week, and I hope you enjoyed watching either on the live or the replay. Bye-bye for now, and over to our sponsors.
We face daily cyber risks, spending over 7 hours of screen time, including 4.5 hours on mobile phones. This convenience comes with significant dangers, with cybercrime costs predicted to exceed $10.5 trillion by 2025. In 2023 alone, seniors lost over $3.4 billion to cybercrime. Our goal is to make social engineering concepts of cybersecurity easier to understand. We work with business teams, senior living facilities, investment companies, and educational institutions, both individually and in groups. We offer real-life examples to help you recognize and prevent attacks, with sessions available both in person, in selected regions, and remotely. Schedule your training session, or to learn more, contact us today. Call us at 847-845-9360. Email us at info@cybersecurityeasy.com. Protect your team and family with cybersecurityeasy.com.
My name is Dr. Felix Kravitz, and I am the founder of cybersecurityeasy.com, LLC. We live in a world full of vulnerabilities and cyber risks. We spend almost 4.5 hours a day on our mobile phones. It's over 7 hours of screen time daily when including computer use. We often forget that this convenience comes with risks. Published data predicts that the cost of cybercrime will exceed $10.5 trillion in 2025. These numbers encompass not only businesses, but also each one of us, including our children and our parents. In 2023, the FBI reported over $3.4 billion lost by seniors aged 60 and older. CybersecurityEasy.com LLC's initiative is to massively support the community by providing cyber safety coaching and improving social engineering awareness. Our goal is to make social engineering concepts of cybersecurity easier to understand. We work with business teams, seniors, and educational institutions, both individually and in groups. We cover various topics from phone phishing attacks to AI-generated voice cloning, robocalls, password protection, and more using life examples. Talk to us today. Call us at 847-845-9360 or email us at info@cybersecurityeasy.com.